talk about his Christianity, how he was raised, and how he got to be where he is today. So there's a whole lot of years that's going to be summed up in about 30 to 42 minutes, somewhere in that range. And I know that we only hear one side of who he is, but we're going to hear the real person because I know he's Bible based. I know he's a Christian of the Word, and so we're going to talk about that. And we were just talking, sharing a little bit about how he was raised and different things. And so you get to hear some of this stuff if if he allowed this to happen. So I want to introduce you all to Hugh D. Shine, representative of District 55 here in the state of Texas.
Thank you, Robert. It's great to join you. I think this thing is on.
Yes.
Well, we appreciate the applause, you guys. Can y'all hear me okay? Okay. Well, we're good. Thank you for the opportunity to join you. Robert has given me a kind of a mini tour of the facility here, and I recognized a few things and said, oh, I was here a few years ago for the Boy Scouts.
Yes.
And did a presentation that was here. So y'all done a marvelous job with the church, and this is God's house, and so it's always a blessing to be in God's house.
You blessed us with a flag that flew over the state capitol, and you saw an emblem that's sitting there right now. So I really appreciate that.
I was impressed that y'all framed it with the certificate, which is really great. Most people take the flag and fly it, and I don't know whatever happens to the certificate. But the certificate's not part important. What's really important was when that flag was presented to those kids.
Yes, sir.
That's what's important. When you extend your hand out to someone that's trying to accomplish something or has accomplished something, and congratulate them and let them know that people notice that they have accomplished something, and encourage them, inspire them. It's all about leadership. And a 30-year military veteran, your leadership is kind of stamped in my brain pretty well.
I heard a colonel back there saying the same thing, saying he's about to retire after 32 or 33 years in the military this month. So he's retiring from that. Yeah. But tell us about the Christian Hugh Shine.
Well, I tell you what, I grew up in Navasota, Texas. I was born in Houston. We lived in Houston until I was, seventh grade, first semester, seventh grade. My dad had a farm out in Navasota, and we moved to Navasota. Now, my dad drove school bus, worked for the school, and worked at a service station. We had the farm, but I lived with my grandmother. She was alone. My grandmother probably had the most influence in my life as a Christian and as a young adult than anybody. I lived with my grandmother for a number of reasons. Growing up as a teenager, I'm sure a lot of folks that are listening don't have these problems, but sometimes teenagers have a hard time with mom and dad.
Yes.
But for some reason, my relationship with my grandmother was exceptional. And plus, she needed someone to be around the house because she lived out in the country by herself. And so there was a little community church called Lynn Grove Methodist Church, a little sandstone church. Probably on Sunday, if you had 17, that was a crowd. And it was probably about 150 yards from the house. Mm-hmm. And it was right there. And so I attended that church before we even moved to Navasota and after we moved to Navasota. But my grandmother religiously read the Bible every night. Her eyesight was failing. She was in her 80s. I can remember her sitting in this room. Of course, we didn't have air conditioning in the house or anything like that at all. And she had a light bulb, no shade on it. And, of course, the gnats and the mosquitoes were flying all over the place. But she had her magnifying glass, and every single night my grandmother sat there and would read the scripture. And as a kid, young teenager, 13, 14 years old, wasn't interested in what the Bible had to say that much. But I went to Sunday school and I went to church, and I was hearing the Word. Mm-hmm. And that influenced, because my grandmother loved me unconditionally. And our relationship was one that I cherished tremendously. And that influence, I think, really led me to always embrace Jesus Christ and be, I guess, prepared to give my heart to Jesus when I was 19 years old, when I was in college. So I graduated from high school. I worked all through school, and then graduated from high school. No one in my family went to college. I was the only one that went to college. I wanted to be in the military. Vietnam was going on at the time. That didn't scare me. That didn't bother me. I mean, I have a real patriot heart. Okay, and so I was successful in actually. I had a nomination to West Point. I was an alternate, but I had a girlfriend. Found out that if you got married, you couldn't be at West Point, so I declined. But the Army offered me a full scholarship to Sam Houston State University, and I accepted it. And while I was there, I got involved with the Baptist Student Union at school. I was working at college as well, and generally, spent a lot of time with other Christian kids who really had embraced Christ and were already saved. And I got saved at college. I was 19 when I was baptized, and I was baptized at the University Heights Baptist Church in Huntsville, Texas. And from that point on, and I really believe God had always worked in my life, like He does for a lot of folks. And from that point on, I would have to say that God has really always had a real strong arm in my life of influencing me and putting me through lots of different experiences. And both when I graduated from college, went in the service, and all through my adult life. And I can't, even to this day, I feel compelled that I need to read some piece of scripture of some sort every morning before I start my day and every evening before I go to bed. And I made it a point this year for the first time. Someone shared with me about the book of Luke in the 24 chapters of reading a chapter a day in December. And then on Christmas morning, you've read all 24 chapters, and then on Christmas morning, you wake up with a real revelation in your heart about what Jesus Christ and His walk here on earth was all about. And it gives you a totally different perspective. And I have, because I've done that, now I share that experience with folks that next Christmas, I'm going to encourage people, starting on December the 1st, is to pick up the book of Luke and read each chapter each day up through Christmas Eve. And I'd be interested in, if people who do that, how they will feel Christmas morning.
Wow.
That's something I just added.
Yes.
That I've done. But I love the book of James. That's my favorite in the New Testament. Obviously, Proverbs and Psalms in the Old Testament. But I have to pick up the book of James and read all 5 chapters, not just one, all 5 of them at one setting, just to be refreshed. And I think that's necessary for all of us as Christians, that we need that refreshing experience.
Yes. I mean, you have just, man, you put a lot into this session so far, and I haven't got to where we need to go yet. But, and I remember, you said that your grandmother, she had gnats flying. I mean, that's detailed. So you didn't just make this up.
I can still see her sitting there. While I'm sitting watching a black and white television that was probably a 13-inch screen of maybe some sequel like Combat or Wagon Train or something like that. And my grandmother would walk by, and she would always kind of, poo-poo the idea of being watching TV, because I'm sure she was a witness. She was an example to me, and that memory will never go away.
Wow, that's awesome.
Yeah.
So she instilled something into you, and knowing well that in your years to come, it would still be impacted in your life.
She planted the seeds.
Yes.
She
Wow.
planted the seeds. It's as in reading scriptures and studying the Bible to whatever extent, certainly not like a pastor or someone who's that's their profession. But I realize that God has us out there. Some some have the responsibility of planting seeds.
Mm-hmm.
Some cultivate the seeds, and there are those who harvest the seeds. And so when toward the end of my active duty time in the military, at Emmanuel Baptist Church, I was asked to be the high school director. I was not, it was it wasn't even a job. It was just a lay job.
Mm-hmm.
And for about 6 years, was the high school director there at Emmanuel Baptist Church. And I remember one young man that I was successful in leading to Christ.
Mm-hmm.
I guess I had influence on the other kids, but I can only say that God probably has used me more to maybe be like my grandmother was, being a seed or maybe cultivating,
Mm-hmm.
but from an experience of actually harvesting someone for Christ, I can only attest to one. Although he has revealed to me influence that I have had in my career in the lives of a lot of other people, particularly in the military.
Yes, sir.
Particularly in the military.
Yeah. Now, as we was talking earlier, before the mics was on, cameras was kicking, you was talking about the way you was raised up, and you was raised up on the other side of town.
Yeah.
And I said I didn't never knew about that. I just knew the huge
Well,
shine.
we were typical back in the '60s. I would have to say, middle class family. I mean, I don't know how my mom and dad were able. My mom was a seamstress. She sewed for all the girls in high school for their prom dresses and everything else. I mean, she was really a good seamstress. And I know she made some money for my dad. I kind of described, we had the farm. He drove a school bus, worked at the school and service station. No one in my family had gone to college,
Mm-hmm.
and I was the only one that did. We managed, but we didn't live on the side of town, so to speak, that most of the kids in town. So, and that was a period of time of a lot of prejudice too, Robert,
Mm-hmm.
as you know. Okay, and for some reason, I don't know if it was the influence that my grandmother had or what it was, but something in my heart, I never really grew up with the racial prejudice that a lot of my fellow students had.
Mm-hmm.
And that made me a little different too, okay, as far as how I got along with some of the other kids.
Mm-hmm.
But I don't regret it at all. And of course, when I got into the service was not segregated at all. And I can remember being in the demilitarized zone in the DMZ, and the weather was really terrible. And my platoon sergeant, Odell McGee, I'll never forget Odell. He was about 6'5", shaved his head every morning, tall black man. And we shared a pup tent together in the DMZ when the weather was bad. Never thought anything about it.
Mm-hmm.
And so, when I get into conversations with folks, I always tell people that the C letter stands for one thing in my book, and it's character.
Mm.
C stands for character. It
Mm-hmm.
doesn't stand for color. And of course, that's kind of how I see things and feel.
Wow. And you say you even pick cotton.
Well, there was a black man that worked with my dad on the farm, and he sharecropped. And back in the '60s, I can remember being in a group picking cotton, and I did that a few times. We grew watermelons. I used to sell watermelons on the side of the road for 25 cents a piece.
Wow.
Ben taught me how to drive a tractor. He taught me how to ride a horse. He taught me a lot of things, and we had corn for our cattle, and we would have to pull it off the stalk. Now, this wasn't a big operation. We only had like 125 or 130 acres of land, but we had to do everything by hand.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, and I remember the trailer. I would go to the cotton gin with Ben when he'd get the trailer full with the cotton, and I can tell you, I did that one summer, and that I don't know. Those kind of things just teach you things you just never forget.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know how to put words to that necessarily. But when I was 14 years old, I knew that I wanted to get into radio and electronics. And folks, if you go back into the 60s, the transistor was invented back in the early 60s and what have you. And I really got into that. And I remember I had an opportunity to work at the little radio station in Navasota. But you had to have a radio telephone license.
Mm-hmm.
Well, folks, I'm 14 years old. Folks, I mean, you can't do this today. I remember getting on the bus in Navasota, Texas, and taking the bus to Houston. Got out of the bus in the bus station in downtown Houston. I'm 14 now. I had the address of the Federal Communications Commission. I'd been studying the books. And I went and took my radio telephone license, and I got my third-class radio telephone license with a broadcast endorsement so that I would be able to go to work at that radio station. And through high school, and this took me off the farm. I wasn't doing farm work anymore. I wasn't driving the tractor or that. Because I signed on this little, it was a little AM station, and the way AM stations are, you can't sign on before official sunrise, and you have to sign off at official sunset.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I worked part-time, like on Saturdays and Sundays, and then the guy that was there regularly quit, and there was another person there, and what I started doing my junior and senior year in high school, I signed on that station every morning at 5:30, worked till 8 o'clock, and then went to school. I came in during my lunch, so the guy that was there, and I was there for about 30 minutes or 45 minutes, and then in the afternoon when I got out of school, I was there and signed off whenever sunset was. And I would usually work Saturdays, and I worked part of a day on Sunday. And, of course, on a little AM station like that on Sunday mornings, you always had a live church broadcast.
Mm-hmm.
So I wasn't missing church because I'm sitting there running the board while the First Baptist Church of Hempstead, Texas is broadcasting on the radio. And then when I got to college, I did some radio work for whenever people were on vacation or something like that in different places. You know, the experiences I had, I worked for the newspaper a little bit, but the radio was something I did for about 6 years. But, I mean, all through my life, God has just kind of led me different paths and given me different experiences and just continued to bless me.
Wow, the scripture does tell us to order, for him to order our steps. And sometimes we don't have no idea why we're doing what we're doing, but we know it's for a reason.
Well, Jesus is a lamp unto my feet and a light unto my path.
Yes, yes. Most definitely. That's the only way we can live today.
I close my prayer every day with thank you, Lord, for being the lamp unto my feet and the light unto my path.
Wow. That's awesome. I mean, you're instilling something to people that's watching right now.
Well, and all of us, if we really have accepted Jesus as our Savior, then we serve at His pleasure.
Yes.
And what's really difficult sometimes, Robert, is, number one, being content with where He has you. And number two, wondering what His pleasure really is for you at the moment, okay? And really constantly seeking in your heart that are you really doing God's will in your life? Mm-hmm. It's not your will, it's God's will. And you have to remind yourself, too, it's not about you, it's not about me, but we think about you, we think about me.
Right, right.
It's really about Him with a capital H.
Mm-hmm.
And we have to remind ourselves that the life we're living, if we're really walking in the Spirit, that it's all about Him.
Yes.
And boy, let me tell you, as human beings, we struggle with that constantly, every single day.
Mm-hmm.
And we just have to go through and remind ourselves it's all about Him.
Wow. Let's talk about your life in the military.
Okay.
And you can pick it up whenever you choose to.
I was commissioned second lieutenant at Fort Riley, Kansas. And I went on active duty. I went to Fort Knox, Kentucky. I was commissioned an armor officer. Vietnam was still going on. And I got picked up for flight school right out of my armor basic, and I went straight to flight school. This is where some of my experiences really, really start here. While in flight school, you go through military training, you have a buddy. And when you're a pilot, it's a stick buddy. And on a September morning in 1976, I had a dental appointment. And I usually went to academics in the morning, flew in the afternoon. And on this particular Friday, I had my dental appointment on Friday afternoon. So there was a gentleman, he was a captain, I was a second lieutenant. He rode with me to work every day. We were friends. I'm not somebody that hung around the bar. And so when we were done with training for the day, I came home. And I remember his wife would always tell folks that she really liked Jim riding with me because she knew he was always going to come home. Okay? And, of course, with Vietnam going on, let me tell you, that was an era where officers, pilots were dying left and right or being seriously injured left and right. And so, there was always concerns for that. But I had to switch out on that Friday. And I had to fly that morning. It was the same aircraft with the same instructor, and I switched out with a young man named Bob Tyndall. And Bob took my seat that afternoon with Jim, and they flew that same aircraft that afternoon. They crashed and killed all three of them.
Wow.
Even today, I still live with the fact that that was my seat. Bob Tyndall died in my seat. Now, I couldn't fly for a while after that. I mean, I'm 23 years old, and the experience of that, here's a country kid that had never been out of Texas. Until I got in the military. And I remember the military sends you to all these psych guys, whatever they want to call them, talking about this, trying to help you get through that experience. And I remember my pastor, Dr. Wells, First Baptist Church, Enterprise, Alabama. And I went to see him because I was going to my academics, but I wasn't flying. And I remember sitting in there with Dr. Wells and talking about, my problem was I couldn't quit because that was not my nature to quit something. And he asked me about that, and I said, he asked me this question. He said, well, why are you here? Why are you in flight school? And I said, because I believe this is what God wants me to do. And he said, well, you've answered your question. He said, you can't quit. He says, if you really believe in your heart this is what God wants you to do, you can't quit. Because if you quit, you'll live with that the rest of your life, that you quit. And you will always wonder what you would have done. So I was able to pull myself up. And fortunately, the training guys there recognized, what I'd gone through, and gave me some additional flight training after hours and the weekends to get me back up to speed. I didn't graduate at the bottom of my class, didn't graduate at the top, but I graduated with my class.
That's great.
And what's really interesting is my new stick buddy is Craig Pearson, who's the administrator for First Baptist Church in Belton.
Didn't know that.
And I never realized until a few years ago why Craig was my stick buddy. He was senior to me, for one thing. Had been in the service for a few more years, but he was a solid student pilot and one of the better ones. And they put me with Craig because Craig was there to watch out for me and to help me get over the hump. And I've been able to share that with Craig before. And so we go back to when we were stick buddies together in 1976.
Wow, I didn't know that.
And then immediately after I graduated from flight school, I shipped out and went overseas. And I was I served 13 months on the DMZ in South Korea.
Mhm.
Vietnam ended about the same time, or just before then, and so rather than being shipped off to Vietnam, I ended up. But I'm a Vietnam era soldier from that standpoint. Came back, was stationed at Fort Hood, and I spent 6 years on active duty. And in 1980, I got off active duty. The military was going through a lot of changes under the Carter administration. I'd been overseas and I'd had a real mission. I was doing what I was trained to do and what I wanted to do, and I came back and all I was doing was managing soldiers who had drug problems. Back then, if you committed a crime, you either went to jail or you joined the Army.
Mm-hmm.
And I had a slew of 19 Deltas that were scouts assigned to my platoon that chose the Army as opposed to going to jail.
Wow.
You can imagine what kind of management crisis that was.
Yes, sir.
And then the other part of it is because the military was being downsized, we didn't have money to really fly and be proficient, and but I didn't want to give up flying. And so I stayed in the National Guard, and I finished out 24 years for my 30 years of service in the Guard, and I commanded at every level. I actually took a ground command in an armored cav squadron out of Waco. I had a troop. It was Alpha Troop that was here in Temple. And I went back into aviation, and I was a battalion commander. And then after 3 years as a battalion commander, I was a brigade commander and spent 4 years. I got to go to the Army War College and got a master's degree there. And I'd gone to Baylor previously and got a master's there. And when I retired in 2004, I had commanded all the aviation in the state of Texas for the governor.
Mm-hmm.
Had a Chinook battalion, Apache battalion, a Black Hawk battalion, a maintenance battalion. Texas has a full brigade. And I took command about 6 months before 9/11.
Mm-hmm.
And that was a real interesting period of time. I was deploying my Cav squadron to Fallujah with the Marines. My Chinooks were in Afghanistan, my Apaches were in Bosnia, and my Black Hawks were spread between Iraq and South Korea. And then in 2004, I retired after 30 years.
Wow. Have you ever thought about writing a book or just talking and someone just writing it for you or something? Because you have a lot of history.
Well, I've not been inclined to do anything like that, but I will share this one story with you that I think is really a testimony about how God works in our lives.
Mm-hmm.
I shared with you about losing my stick buddy early in my career as a lieutenant.
Yes, sir.
On my last flight in July of 2004, we flew to Fredericksburg and had lunch.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. And I'm sitting in the Black Hawk. Oh, by the way, I went through transit. I flew the Huey and I flew the Black Hawk. I flew the Apache, but I'm in the Black Hawk in my last flight. And I'm sitting in the right seat. My co-pilot's a warrant officer sitting over in the left seat. And I've got a young sergeant standing here on my right at the door holding my helmet as I'm getting in and I'm strapping in. And this young sergeant looks at me and he said, "Colonel Shine," he said, "can I ask you a question?" And I said, "Well, sure." He says, "You've been in politics, you've had this military career, you got a business that you run, you come to the hangar, I mean, you're there with us as the soldiers, you're just with us all the time and doing these things." He said, "Who's your mentor?" Now, I had been wrestling for months about my retirement because I was 52 years old. I'd spent 30 years in the military. I required my staff and all my pilots to be what we called FAC 1, ARL 1, which meant we were night vision qualified, all of us, whether you were a staffer or you were a line officer. You could fly any mission that we were called on to fly, even me. I set the example, and I made it a point that I could fly any of the missions. In fact, one time I heard in a staff meeting when they were putting crews together, somebody asked who's going to fly with Colonel Shine, and one of the warrant officers spoke up and said, I'll fly with Colonel Shine. He's a good stick." That comment from a warrant officer told me that I was that they saw me as being a good pilot. Anyway, I was wrestling with my retirement, and I made a difference. I didn't have a Medal of Honor, didn't have a Purple Heart. I had my citations and medals and this and that, but I was whole. I was all one piece, where a lot of my friends weren't.
Mm-hmm.
And I was wrestling with, did I make a difference? And that young soldier, when he asked me that question, I looked at him and I said, Jesus Christ. And he looked at me and responded and said, we thought so.
Mm.
At that moment, God gave me closure with that 30-year career, that even though I didn't do things that people would be recognized for or something like that, that I had obviously had served God for 30 years, influencing the lives of a lot of young soldiers.
Mm-hmm.
And to me, when I realized that, I had a tingling throughout my body, and God gave me closure.
Wow.
And when I took the aircraft back and we buttoned it up, and I got in my car to leave for the last time, I had tears in my eyes, but I was content with the fact that I had done what God apparently wanted me to do, and I didn't even know it.
Mm. Wow. Ordering your steps.
Yeah.
Wow. Man, that's awesome. That is so awesome.
I share that story with young soldiers since then, whenever I'm at a military event or something like that, because young soldiers need to hear that. Mm-hmm. I've shared it with some friends. I've shared it with a few other people. It's not something that I go out and broadcast, so to speak, but it's something I've experienced. It's been part of my life.
Yes, sir. Wow. Let's talk about how did you know that God called you to go into politics? Because you want to, I keep hearing you saying you want to make a difference, and that is where you can make a difference.
I've served on the city council in Temple. In 1984, I was elected. First race that I ever got involved in. I won by 32 votes. I walked door to door. And I'm not really sure how that came about necessarily, but I only served for 2 years on city council because the state representative seat back then opened up and was an open seat. And I was encouraged by a number of folks to seek that.
Mm-hmm.
I was going through some other things in my life at the time, and I remember praying real deeply, and God convicted my heart that at that moment, yes, go ahead to do that.
Mm-hmm.
And I did, and I got to serve special session 2 full terms. And after that, I left the legislature in 1990 because the congressional seat opened up. You know, I wasn't really sure about that, but I had a conviction that I needed to run for that. But there was someone else that was interested, and I delayed getting involved until that person made a decision not to run for it. And I remember a prayer that I had, because when I was serving in the legislature the first time, Debbie and I had only been married for about 6 months. And it's really hard for a young person in a career to be able to serve in the legislature and have a business and take care of their family. Mm-hmm. If you've got an established business and you've got a number of years and some tenure and what have you, and you've got a good staff, you can make it work like I do today. Mm-hmm. But back then I didn't have that. And I didn't have technology. There were no computers back then, okay, in the late 80s. Everything was on the telephone.
Right.
Okay? Had I had the technology, I might have been able to have done better. And I remember praying that, Lord, I just recalled it was on a Thursday morning, and I was driving down to Austin for a special session. We were in session in 1989 almost the entire year. Mm-hmm. And my prayer driving down was, Lord, you know, I'm here to serve, and I'm going to continue to serve, but I really need to be able to take care of my wife and my family in a respectful way, you know, financially. And I said, I can't think, if you want me in politics, I can't think how in the world I can make this work unless the congressional seat were to open up and I'd have an opportunity to run for Congress and be there full time.
Mm-hmm.
This is on a Thursday. So Friday morning, I'm on the floor of the House in the chambers. Session hadn't started yet, so I always go early. Got my packet. I'm still one of those guys that reads the bills.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, I want to know what they say.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, and my staff assistant rung me on my phone at my desk and said, Marvin Leith just announced his retirement. I stood there in awe because the day before I had just prayed.
Mm.
You know, God opens doors and he closes doors.
Yes, yes.
Well, about 15 minutes later, I get a call from Senator Phil Gramm.
Mm-hmm.
Now, I knew Phil Gramm. And the senator, if you knew Phil Gramm, wonderful guy and was a great mentor, very brash.
Mm-hmm.
So on the phone, I answer the phone and I say, hello, Senator. And his first comment is, call a press conference and announce you're running for Congress now. And I said, Senator, I haven't even called my wife to tell her about this yet. And he said, to blank, 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 to Debbie, call a press conference and announce you're running. And I responded to him, I said, I have to call Debbie and talk to her about this. Okay. I don't believe in coincidence.
Yes, sir.
As a Christian. I mean, sometimes we would use that terminology to kind of make, you know, because it's you know, secular society.
Mm-hmm.
I would truly believe that there was a response there to my prayer.
Yes, sir.
Because of my heart. But when I finally decided to make the announcement to run, I remember another prayer. Lord, I pray that I'm successful and that I will have a successful career as a congressman. But if not, if this is not what you want me to do, then if I lose, please bless my business so that I can care for my family. I lost that race. And within 2 years, maybe 3, my business had grown exponentially.
Wow.
Greater than any expectation I could have ever had.
Mm-hmm. Mm.
And continued. Okay? I went back to school at that time, right after the race was over, and got my master's at Baylor. I went to Wharton, and my military career took off. And what can I say? And after I retired from the military in 2004, I pretty much just took care of business and
Mm-hmm.
the family, and got into, I love to fish, and I love to fly. And so I was fishing and flying a lot more until 2016, when I was approached about returning to the legislature.
Mm.
And I remember telling some friends, I said, well, I can attempt to do that, but there was an incumbent. And I said, there's no guarantee I can win, but I'll give it a shot.
Mm-hmm.
And Debbie has been my partner as we campaigned and as I serve. And basically, folks, you get 2 for the price of 1, because when I'm not able to be places, Debbie is able to fill in and do it. And she's a right hand in my service to the community in the legislature. And here I am fixing to serve my 4th term.
Wow.
This round. And it's just remarkable what God can do in your lives
Mm-hmm.
if you let God do those things. One other little side bit I just remembered, and I don't know why I forgot this, but in 1987, when I was there the first time, we had a little Bible study group that met in the members' lounge, and we got the Gideons to get Bibles, and we put Bibles in every desk on the house floor.
Wow.
And we
That's
put a
amazing.
little note in there that when you sat at that desk, we put a note on it and asked that whatever member was sitting at that desk, that they would put the year and their favorite verse in there.
Mm-hmm.
And when I returned, one of the first things I did was go back to my first desk to see who had been sitting in that desk and how many individuals that had been in that desk had actually entered their name and scripture that they had. So, that's just another little sidebar, because we're talking about Christian things, and
Yes, sir.
I think that was an important thing that a group of us did. There was about 10 or 11 of us that had a kind of a Bible study at that time, and that's what we did.
Yes. Now, there's a lot of bills that you brought to the house. Quite a bit. I've noticed that. Talk about just a few of them that was very
Well, when I was
interesting.
there, Stan Schleter was the representative from Colleen, good friend and a mentor, good mentor. The two of us jointly authored the Underground Water Conservation District for Bell County. I was also the joint author of something called the Rainy Day Fund, which now has over $12 billion in it.
Mm.
And see, back in the 80s, we had a real crisis. The oil and gas market had collapsed. The real estate market had collapsed. The savings and loans companies had all gone bankrupt. And the economy was really in the doldrums. And we were short money in the legislature. And after we finally got a budget passed, Stan approached me and said, we need to have some type of an emergency fund. And we created the Rainy Day Fund. And we said, I can remember us saying that we thought it might have $100 million in it. No way in the world did we ever dream that it would be $12 billion.
Wow.
And be what it is today. Obviously, as a Christian, I'm pro-life, and I actually in 1987 or 89, I don't remember exactly which date, Ben Kubiak from Brenham, a Democrat, and I jointly sponsored the first anti-abortion bill in the legislature since the 1800s. We were successful in limiting abortions in the third trimester, because the Senate, it was a little bit tighter than that, but the Senate, watered it down to where it was only in the third trimester. But that was a significant piece of legislation as well, that I was involved in, those three items. And then in returning, just like a lot of folks that are in this room right now that own property, we've all complained about the values of our homes and the property taxes we have to pay. So I made it a point that when I returned to the legislature, I said, I'm coming down for policy. And I want to serve on the Ways and Means Committee. And by the way, I kept my seniority from being there the first time.
Okay.
So that put me way up. In fact, right now I'm number 14 among the 86 Republicans, and I'm number 32 among 150 House members. And so serving on the Ways and Means Committee allows me to address property tax issues. Now, I'll tell you, folks, it's one person. There's 183 people in the process. You got the governor, lieutenant governor, 31 senators, and 150 House members. And getting anything done is a real challenge. Doesn't mean you don't try, and doesn't mean you stop trying.
Yeah.
Okay? And I don't intend to stop trying on reforms and what have you in the process. But I always use this analogy. Trying to get 183 people to agree to something. So I always say, how many husband and wives agree 100% of the time on every decision they make? And I always get smiles. Every now and then somebody will pop up in the audience and raise their hand. And then I watch the wife smack them across the face. Okay? Government, in the experience, there are a lot of people that make their living from government policy that is there, and changing that government policy, you have the possibility of changing their livelihood. So you have a lot of opposition.
Yes.
Some of it more out of fear of changing their livelihood, and the fear of the unknown is pretty powerful. So what I try to do is I try to work with a coalition of individuals and try to bring them together over a period of time, rather than starting a process of trying to change policy or make better policy in January when we go back in session. I work on it the entire interim, just like I did this past year, and bringing people to the table every 2 weeks or once a month and bring people to the table to have opposing views to try to reach a consensus so that we can make some policy changes for the betterment of all of us. We've been successful doing that.
Yes, yes.
I had a constitutional amendment my second term this round back in 2019 of a constitutional amendment that if your home or business is destroyed and the governor declares a disaster area and it's destroyed by a hurricane, a flood, pardon me, fire, and I think or tornado, you can make application with the appraisal district and have anywhere from 15 to 100% of the value of your property exempted from property tax that year.
Wow.
Now, the idea came from when I was going down to the coast after Harvey and looking at all the destruction. And Rockport was basically completely wiped away, in parts of Port Aransas and other communities down there, and going down there for hearings and what have you and seeing this, I said, and I was asking people about, there was no mechanism at the time that if you had a property tax statement, you still had to pay it unless the appraisal district went and did a reappraisal. Well, that's expensive and time consuming. So we made the constitutional amendment where it's by application. Well, guess what? What was it last year when we had the tornado hit South Bell County? We had constituents down there that were able to use that legislation to give them some relief. And that's going to be true. And I consider that piece of legislation monumental as we go on, because we're going to have more hurricanes.
Yes.
We're going to have tornadoes. We're going to have fires. And there are going to be more and more folks out there that are going to benefit from that piece of legislation. We passed it out of the House unanimously. It passed with 80-some-odd% on the ballot as a constitutional amendment. And then this past session, I was able to get a bill that put more tools into taxpayers' hands when you protest your evaluations. And I'm working on another piece right now to expand that in this next session. In fact, I was on about an hour Zoom call today with folks. And again, people coming to the table wanting to address the policy and trying to do it in a form that we have a consensus on what's the best way to do it and how it. And I think we may have a piece of legislation that really will be monumental in itself there as well.
Yes, sir.
Okay.
Wow.
So I went to Austin this time for policy reasons, because I'm at a point in life. I've been blessed. Oh, by the way, I was a Reagan appointee in '86. Served 2 years in the Reagan administration. I mean, I look at the things that God has allowed me to be a part of, and the things that He has done, and I marvel at it. And I'm just grateful for the life He's given. And He is blessed in such a way that if God calls me home, my family is taken care of financially, so I'm content with that. So I guess I just need to continue to serve.
Wow.
Okay, and that's kind of what's in my heart. Yeah. It gets frustrating. It gets, we ask each other a lot of times, why are we doing this? Most of the time, it's pretty thankless. You're constantly being barraged by people that disagree with you. And, we've gotten to the point in this country where, because of Facebook and social media and stuff, you can say all kinds of bad things about people and never have to have justify it. You can just put it out there. And it grinds on you a little bit.
Yes.
Okay, you just have to kind of ignore it and just go on. And if you believe that you're doing what's right, just keep on going and do what's right.
Man, you said it again. Say it again, because some people need to hear that. That's watching. You can keep on going.
You just have to keep on going. If you truly are walking in the Spirit,
Mm-hmm.
if you truly believe that you're seeking God's will in your life, and I'm not saying that you're going to be 100%, then you just need to keep on going.
Yes.
And I've been knocked down a lot of times.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. You can, there's analogies. I love analogies. There's a door that's closed, and you try it, and if it won't open, see if you can get a key. And if you can't get a key, and you look at the door, if it's got hinges on it, take the dadgum thing off the hinges if you need to get through it. I mean, be innovative. Think outside the box.
Right.
But just remember that, I read a piece of scripture, and it had this in, in a testimony that I was reading, that we should all strive to do what is right versus what's wrong. And we should try to have grace instead of judgment.
That's good.
And we should always try to walk humbly in God's footsteps.
Man, you preaching now.
And I remind myself of that, okay? And these are things that you don't do just once every now and then. These are things that you have to really embrace and do on a daily basis, okay? And I feel guilty sometimes if I get busy and I forget to pray. And the other thing is, now, this one thing about technology I do like on the iPhone. There's a little app here called, see if I can pull it up here, called Notes. So when I visit with folks and somebody shares a need, I put them on my prayer list. We're notorious. People are, all of us are notorious about telling people we'll pray for you.
Right.
And about 15 minutes later, if you don't write it down, you're going to forget.
Exactly.
So if I put it in my notes, it's there. And I will continue to pray for that person until something else happens that they don't need that prayer anymore. And I have started using that. And I do that. Gosh, I mean, there's just so much that you can always share. I mean, the experiences that we have when you're a Christian, I think God really expects you to share those experiences and to be there. Sometimes you just need to be there.
Yes.
Sometimes there's not anything you really need to do. Sometimes you just need to be there. Oh, and the other little thing that is really turned out really nice. When I was in the military, I had my commander coin as a brigade commander. And when soldiers did something extraordinary, I would have a little ceremony and present them the coin. Let me tell you, that really meant a lot. Well, when I became state representative again, and from that experience in the military, I designed their coin as a state representative. Now, I don't have one in my pocket right now. I wished I'd thought about bringing one. But it has the seal of the state of Texas on one side. It has the state on the back side. It has State Representative Hugh Shines. It's got the state of Texas. I think it's got the mockingbird on it and the blue bonnet and what have you. And it has a little inscription piece there that says, "Next to faith and family, serving your country is the highest calling." And whenever someone in the community, like a Boy Scout gets to be Eagle Scout, I always give Eagle Scouts a coin. And individuals in the community that have accomplished and achieved things, I will make a presentation and give them that coin. And there was a 9-year-old girl, I think it was, that Bobby Ott had recognized, who learned sign language to help her mother and to help other kids. And Bobby told me about it. I said, "Bobby, that girl needs a coin." So at Thornton Elementary, Bobby put it together, and I showed up there and presented that young lady that coin. And then when she received Bobby Ott's Leadership Award, week before Christmas, I guess
Yes,
it was,
yes, she was.
and I saw her there, she pulled the coin out of her pocket and said, "You gave me this." Those little things have a dramatic impact in some people's lives. So that's important.
Wow. Where do you see yourself going from here?
What's
Where do
that?
you see yourself going from here? I mean, you've done more than a lot of people have done in their lifetime, but where do you see yourself going from here?
Well, at some point in time, heaven. Okay. I don't know. I serve at God's pleasure.
Mhm.
You know, I don't know when He's going to call. I believe that I'm where I need to be right now.
Yes.
I mean, I don't need to be looking at running for a different office or anything else. I enjoy serving the community where I am right now and helping people get through doors that are locked
Yes.
and getting things through a bureaucracy that just seems to be so bloated and insensitive. And I think as long as I have the energy
Mm-hmm.
and the people continue to, the constituency continues to want me to be there to serve, I think that's what I'll do.
That's awesome.
You know?
Yes.
And I continue to work. I have a business. I don't intend to retire from the business because I love what I do. And there are a lot of folks that I believe really need me to help them
Yes, sir.
with things that need to happen there professionally. And I have a staff that's worked for me for over 20 years. I have one staffer that's been with me for 34 years.
Wow.
Two that have been with me for 22 years. One that has been with me for about 18 years. And then I just recently brought my son in about 3 years ago. He's starting his 4th year with me. And I always comment to him, I said, "Now, David, these folks have been here for a while. And, you know, whether I'm still here or not at some point in time, I think they'll still be here.
Mm-hmm.
So you need to make sure that y'all develop a good working relationship for the long term." And, I mean, when you got a staff like that to work with, it makes going to work not work.
Right. That's true.
Makes it enjoyable, you know. You still have bureaucracy to deal with. You still have corporate policy and all kinds of stuff, and it gets a little frustrating.
Right.
You know, it gets to be a pain in the butt, so to speak.
Yes.
But I just pray that when those things happen, that God brings something else out to kind of wipe it away.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so
That's
we keep
awesome.
going.
That's awesome. It's been almost a good pleasure time of you talking, and I love it when you talk. I mean, I can rest, and I can sit over here and listen and then know the huge shine that other people may say or what's on the screen, but actually hearing you verbatim saying who shine is, and it brings a different light of who you know, because the only thing you know is a politician, but where was he raised at? Where was he going? Where did he went to school at? And accepted Christ at 19 years. See, we don't hear none of that. The only thing we hear is just.
You can't get that in a 30-second spot.
But that's awesome. I mean, you have just enlightened me in a lot of things, and I was just reflecting over my life as you was talking. You know, like wow. I said okay, and you know, it's like going back down memory lane, and seeing
Well, you know
some
what
things.
is it in Matthew about the talents? Is that where
Yes.
Jesus talks about the talents? You know, He gives all of us talents.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, and I think we should recognize what those talents are, but He wants us to invest those talents in others.
Yes.
Okay, it's just like the story of the wealthy man and the workers that were there, and the guy that went and invested and doubled it, and blah blah blah. You know, from that standpoint, sharing those talents with others, I think, is something that's expected,
Yes, sir.
and I think the scriptures tell you what, I can't think of a better manual to live by.
Yes, you brought me back to some memories. I know I never thought we'd be sitting here talking or doing a podcast, but I remember my niece came to me many years ago, and she said, "I think we get on the air." I said, "What do you mean go on the air?" I said, "I'm not ready to go on the air." She said, "No, I think we go on the air." And her name is Christina Butler Kelly, and then she got us on the air, and I like, what do we need? And she told us all the different equipment that needs to be on there, and I was all nervous and shaking and didn't know what to say. And she said, "Just be who you are." I said, "Well, that's comical more than anything else." And then she said, "Well, we need more equipment. We need to do this." And I just thank her for pushing me to a different level from where I am today. Because right now I just be having just regular church, but no, she said, "No, we could do something. We want to go throughout the world," and we always talked about going throughout the world and getting a podcast on or a station. But I thought I'll be like going physically going to Uganda and going to this place and all that. But she said, "No, we could do it in the air, and if they're interested in watching you, they'll watch you." So I get excited, and I just hear you like, wow. Just
as we talk and keep going, other things pop in my mind of things that I've been involved in and doing. It's all about people.
Yes.
It's all about reaching out to folks. I remember how much time we got. Are we about done?
In about 10 minutes.
Okay. Well, I remember when I was in Korea, we had an orphanage down at the end of our airfield, the Korean kids. And I remember for Christmas, we decided we had ration control cards, so you could only get a certain amount of candy and soft drinks and sodas and stuff like that. So we decided as a platoon, I was the platoon leader, that we were going to use a portion of our ration control cards leading up to Christmas, and we were going to do something for those orphans.
Mm-hmm.
Now, this was the Mugawa Choir. Now, the Mugawa Choir, I didn't know this until after we had done this, actually had come to the United States and actually performed on the Red Skelton show. Okay? So just something I'd learned. Anyway, we put together our little sacks of candy and all kinds of things, and we went down there on Christmas morning because we were there. I mean, we didn't have any family or anything there. We went down as a platoon, and we took these gifts down there, and the kids put on a musical for us after we made the presentation to them, and I still remember all those kids singing in English with the Korean accent and performing for us. Again, reaching out and doing something for other folks that you didn't have to do.
Mm-hmm.
And what it did, it inspired those young soldiers to go do something like that. And it was amazing how their response was, because, I mean, these kids were 19, 20 years old, and I don't know very many of them really knew God or knew the Lord or not, but it was an experience that I hope that it planted a seed. I hope it did.
Wow. Man, you talk about going back down memory lane, and if you just sit there and just talk about the memories and things you have done, someone can write it for you, and then it can be published. I'm just being honest with you. It could be done because, we need to know, the world needs to know who Hugh D. Shine is.
Well, I appreciate that, Robert. I mean, I'm not sure that's, you think about, I love history, and you think about this. How many people really remember what a state legislator did in 1876 or 1906 or whatever? We're here for just a short period of time.
Yes, sir.
Okay? So I don't know that it's that important that we have our name across on a marquee or anything like that. Really and truly, the only thing that's important is to make sure our name is in the book of life.
Definitely.
Okay? I mean, I'm looking here real quick because a dear friend of mine just passed away this week, Tommy Taylor. I don't know if y'all know Tommy. He was a actor and a singer and what have you. And he wrote a song, and I sure wish, I thought I had it in my notes here, but I don't think I do. But he took the music of a Frank Sinatra tune called My Way.
Okay.
I think y'all may know. and he put it into words that, well, basically talking about Jesus,
Mm-hmm.
talking about Christ, and living life his way.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't seem to have it, but I have saved that because it was in a church program years ago. And every now and then I pull it out. I can't sing worth a darn, but I can at least read the lyrics. And I tell you what, I wished I had them to share with you right now, because it is, and I shared with his wife a couple of years ago that I pulled it out of my Bible and showed it to her, and she had tears in her eyes. Pam Taylor, she's at First Baptist Church in Belton. And I said, I've kept these.
Mm-hmm.
I think this program is over 30 years old with the lyrics that he had in the program, because it was, in my opinion, it was such a powerful,
Mm-hmm.
powerful tune. And I've got to make it a point to see Pam before the service, because I really think that in respect and for Tommy, that I would like to hear somebody sing that song at his service.
Well, you could come
Yeah.
back in a later date
you
and,
know.
bring all the other things.
I'm sorry?
Say, Jesus is a rock in a weary land.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, gosh, I wished I could. I've gone through this a time or two, and I don't see it here. But
Okay.
it would, the Frank Sinatra tune was, it was my way.
I did it my way. Yes.
I did it my way.
Yes. Mhm.
And in the way he wrote it is, I did it God's way, and talked about. The lyrics. It is powerful. I still have it. It's in my Bible. I know that.
Yes, sir.
And so I need to try to get that to Pam before the service on Friday. I think it is. It would be great if somebody could sing that at his service, because he wrote it.
Yes, sir.
And she was surprised I still had it when I shared it with her a couple of years ago. Those things are just special things.
Yes, sir. I'm elated that, like, say, you, all the busyness that you instill, you still had time to come here and talk, and relate. So,
Robert, I believe that if you're serving the community in your public office, that is a primary responsibility next to your family and your business. That you should not be all things to all people at all.
Yes, sir.
But you should be there to let the community know that you're there to represent them, that you are the people's representative, and hopefully people will realize that you can't do the impossible. Maybe every now and then you might do something that was impossible, but you're always trying to serve and to do the best you can in making life a little bit better for them,
Mm-hmm.
and maybe setting an example for whoever follows you to try to do the same thing.
Yes, sir.
Okay?
Yes, sir. That's deep.
And I just believe that in all my heart.
Yes, sir. Well, thank you, sir. I appreciate you coming in.
Oh, thank you
Spending
for
some
the
time
invitation.
with us, and like I said, we had to come and, give me another date, and we can come back and finish up the phase 2 and 3, 4, and 5.
Your listeners may have gotten all they want of me tonight, but
But that's, you instilled to us a lot of nuggets that happened to you, and people, we would think about this later on. We might be driving down to Fredericksburg and think about, okay, I remember Hugh Shine, he flew down here, and all these different things go through our, go through our mind, so it's good.
Last story. Spent a lot of weekends flying my National Guard missions. My kids were playing soccer, and I couldn't go to the game, but I made it a point to fly across Temple and wait on my mission. and I circled the soccer field a couple of times in the helicopter. And I remember the coach saw a couple of days later. He said, "Shine," he said, "if you're going to do that, let me know ahead of time." He said, "because the kids just stopped playing. All they did was just stand there looking up at the sky the whole time, you know." And when I flew the old Huey, you know, if you kicked in the pedal just right, it would give you that whop whop sound. Mm-hmm. And I would love to fly over the school, kick in that pedal, and my daughter would be sitting there in the class, and she'd say, "That was my daddy." You know. God bless you. Thank you for having me.
Well, sir, thank you. Appreciate you joining us at New Day Fellowship Church. You're growing church, new vision for a multicultural generation. We thank you for our State Representative 55, Hugh D. Shine, of coming this direction and celebrate with us. So if you need a church home, come find us or find other churches in the various area, because God is everywhere where we are. So you always remember, it's not about us, but it's about Him. So as long as we serve Him, then things will work out so awesome. So thank you for joining us, Mr. Hugh Shine. Appreciate you coming and hanging out with us, and we'll see you sometime soon. God bless you.